It's your boy, the humorous L-Man, back with another video, and today we are going to be talking about Future's new album, The Real Me. Alright, as you can see, I got the album right here, right? And I kind of wanted to talk about what I think about the album, some of the things I've been seeing online about the album, and, shit like that, right? And to get straight into it, I definitely do fuck with the album, or at least I like the album. I think it's a decent album. But I just first want to talk about the stuff I didn't necessarily like about the album, right? Because there's some songs on here, and as you can see from my scrolling, there's like 2 or 3 songs on here that I was just like, yeah, nah, right? So first one that I was just like, I don't know what the fuck Future is really doing on here. You know what I'm saying? You got 2018. This, as you can tell from like the online chatter, right? This is a song where Future is doing the weird King's Dead voice that he was doing on that song, and I'm not gonna lie, the song is trash. Like, that's just how I feel about it, right? And the fact that this is the longest song on the album is kind of insane to me. Like, I don't really see why this song needed to be so long, right? And then there's the song Build a Bitch, and there's another one on here that Cast a Spell, where I don't really know how to describe those 2 songs in particular, because I only heard them like once or twice before realizing that, yeah, I just don't fuck with them like that. I think those are just more like boring and like really weird than outright like almost offensive to my ears like 2018 was. But you know what I'm saying, like those are also songs I didn't really like care for. And I feel like the album, right, The Real Me, when you think about it, you're kind of expecting like this sort of introspective, Future, right? Like he's expressing himself as like the person, like who he is as like, I guess, a person more so than, I guess, the rapper persona that he puts on, right? Because the rapper persona that a lot of people kind of bought into and think that, that's the entirety of his music, is that he is this like toxic person, and he's the type of nigga to be like, oh, I'm kicking bitches to the curb, and I'm doing this all this different toxic shit to women, right? Like, when you really get into his music, you realize that nigga is really a lover. Like that's more or less why he's toxic, because he really be falling in love and doing all this shit. And I feel like that's kind of misunderstood in Future's music when you really think about it. So when you really think about it in that sense, like, you really know that he's a lover, right? And shit like that. Albums like The Real Me kind of don't really go into it like fully. Like, you've heard albums where he goes into it a little bit more in a way that makes it sound, you kind of understand him on a personal level. This one doesn't really give you that impression that, like, you're really trying to, despite the title, you know what I'm saying? Like, he's not really going fully into, I wouldn't even say his life, but like just the sort of bag that he be getting. He don't be trying too hard to get into. This is just another Future album, you know what I'm saying? Like, that, like, to me, it's kind of on the same tier as like mixtape Pluto, right? Since that was the last, I guess, project they dropped, prior to him, dropping the 2 albums with Metro, which basically started the rap world war of 2024. You know what I'm saying? So, but mixtape Pluto, where those 2 albums, those were more like those were fire fucking albums, right? And then you get mixtape Pluto, which is like, I guess you could say throwaways. I mean, there were still good songs on there, but it's just like it didn't really, like, it's a mixtape where it's not really like cohesive as like an album would, or it's really trying to tell a story. It's just a lot of the typical trap bangers from Future, and I feel like this is more of like, this album is more of an extension of that. You know what I'm saying? Where he's not really trying to be introspective or be anything too crazy outside of like songs like Radio, right? Where you could kind of get an idea of like the real him, you know what I'm saying? Like him, talking about how, the song is not necessarily for the radio, and, him talking about his lifestyle and, stuff like that, right? You don't really get a whole lot of that on this album, and then, you know, and then on top of that, you get some of these like weird experiments, like Alice, right? It's a song produced by Pharrell, and it sounds more like a club song where he's like heavy on the auto tune and shit like that. And this is one of those experiences that I actually did fuck with. You know what I'm saying? Like I actually, was vibing to this song, Alice, surprisingly. You know what I'm saying? Because it didn't really sound like he was doing like super weird shit with his voice and stuff like that, right? So, and the verses kind of go hard too. I can't even lie. So I do fuck with that, and then once we get into the songs that I actually do fuck with, fucking interview, you know what I'm saying? Like Future almost never misses on his intros, and then you got his outros where again he's doing a lot of Future stuff, but it still sounds like it still fire. You know what I'm saying? Like this is not a bad album to me. You know what I'm saying? But the songs that I just mentioned, those songs were absolute garbage, especially 2018. Like I do not want to hear this nigga doing the King's Dead voice for an entire song. You get what I'm saying? But in terms of like Future doing his normal shit, I mean, if you just listen to a Future album, you kind of have an idea of what to expect. You know what I'm saying? Like that's just what I'm thinking. Like you got the song Kick, which he previewed and stuff like that. I was hearing that there was a song that he split, like Snow and Skyami, and I forget which songs that he split, but I remember people on Twitter was like talking about how he shouldn't have split those two songs and shit like that. But yeah, I mean there was also like part of the reason why I wanted to talk about this album in particular was this video by I used to do damn this video by I Used to Be Paid, right? Where he kind of talks about Future hitting like a Father Time moment, or I guess hitting Father Time, right? Where he's in his 40s and shit like that. And he's still producing hits at a decent rate, and he was kind of talking about how we might end up getting to a point where Future might not be able to do that because he's been making hits and doing shit for who knows how long, right? Like 10 plus years, and he's still one of the most popular rappers and still one of the most talked about rappers in the game right now. You know what I'm saying? Outside of like the obvious ones like Kendrick and Drake and stuff like that. And it kind of went into where he was talking about how Future was hitting that point where it's just like I don't know if like it's kind of weird how like Future is still like 40, he's still in his 40s, able to make hits and talk about stuff and not be considered wash. And then this album comes out and it's like shit, we might actually be hitting that point because now with this album, y'all, the songs that I just mentioned that, is getting trashed on and memed about, and, the whole, I guess, album, right, getting to a point where, I mean, Future has gotten, hate for his albums before, but this one kind of seems a little bit different in the sense that, like, I guess there's people that still like it, but there's definitely a little bit more negative conversations surrounding this album than there was for prior Future albums, right? And I already kind of discussed what I thought about the album, right? But in terms of what the people are saying about the album, it's kind of like crazy to think like Future is one of those rappers where niggas weren't really talking shit about him in the same way that people do Lil Baby and artists like that, where they're considered like one song merchants and super washed, and they should just kind of retire from rap. You never really get those like conversations from Future, right? And this is one of those albums where we're getting to the point where people might end up having those conversations or are already having those like conversations. And I kind of wonder how long it's going to take for people to like fully turn on Future. Like, I wonder how many more albums can he drop like this, where Even though, like I said, I personally, like the album, but in terms of like, especially with some of the songs that are on here, like 2018, how long are people going to tolerate it? That's kind of the conversation I want to, that has been opened up. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to take credit for opening up that conversation, but like, how long before people are like, yeah, Future's like fully washed, and he's, there's several album runs where he's like getting trashed on, like as if, you know what I'm saying, like kind of like a Lil Wayne type of thing where like it almost seems like he's going off. I wouldn't even say out the deep end, but just like the way people talked about him in his prime versus now. You know what I'm saying? Like people do not really care or fuck with Wayne now. And we're kind of at a point where Future might end up getting to that point because they're around the same age and they've been making music for years. And you seen how like Lil Wayne was making music back in the day, and everyone was like fucking with him and like going crazy about him. And then you see, albums like the Carter 6 where it's just like, nah, Wayne's completely fucking lost it, like he's washed. And you even hear this for like rappers that, made their debuts in like the late 2010s and, the 2020s, like I said, with Lil Baby, and with, niggas like Polo G and Lil TJ, where, they had their like big debuts and they was going crazy, and then all of a sudden they just stopped making music that people fuck with, right? And Future, you know what I'm saying? Like I said, he's been making music since like what, 2012 or something like that. And in 2026, he still got hits. And I kind of wonder how long it's gonna take for niggas to just like stop fucking with Future. But only time will tell for that. But that's gonna be the end of the video. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. You know what I'm saying? If you fuck with the discussion, please leave a like, please leave a comment, tell me what you think about the album. You know what I'm saying? And peace out.